The restaurant's chandelier caught every shimmer of light, scattering it like fragments of broken glass across the white linen tables. Silverware clinked, laughter swelled, and waiters floated between clusters of proud parents and young graduates. It should have been the perfect evening, the kind of memory a family treasures forever. And then my husband stood up. Gregory Caldwell. Tall. Still handsome in the polished way of a man who had always known how to charm a room. Tapped his champagne glass with the tip of a fork. The sound cut through conversation like a blade. To Amelia, he began, his smile practiced, almost theatrical. Our daughter, our pride, our future. Applause rippled. Amelia flushed, embarrassed but glowing, her graduation cap tilted slightly from the hours of hugs and photos. She had no idea what was coming. None of us did. At least, that's what the room believed. I watched him raise the glass higher. His voice softened, almost reverent. And to new beginnings. For her, and the words hung. A hush fell over the crowd, as if the entire restaurant held its breath. I've decided, Gregory said, to start a new life. Without Bianca, there it was. In one merciless stroke he rewrote the evening. Forks froze mid-air, conversation snapped shut, and every eye turned toward me, waiting for the tears, the outburst, the collapse. But none came. I inhaled, slow and deliberate. My fingers smoothed the napkin in my lap, as if I'd been expecting this moment all along. Gregory's smile faltered, just slightly. He had rehearsed this scene. The applause, the sympathy, the whispered, "Poor man, forced to break free." What he hadn't rehearsed was me not playing my part. I turned to Amelia. She sat rigid, her eyes wide, the shine of her accomplishment suddenly stolen. My heart ached for her. But I would not let her father's betrayal define her night. I leaned in, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "I'm proud of you. Sweetheart. Tonight is still yours." When I straightened, the entire room was waiting for me to shatter. Instead, I rose with quiet grace, chair legs scraping softly against the polished floor. "Please," I said, addressing the stunned guests, my voice steady. "Enjoy your meal. Celebrate, Amelia, that's what matters today." A murmur swept through the tables, confusion and awe tangled together. I reached into my handbag and placed a sealed envelope by Gregory's plate. His brow furrowed as though the script had gone off course. "What's this?" he asked, voice lower now. "Something you'll need later," I replied. And without another word, I walked away. Past the eyes that burned with curiosity, past the whispers, past the betrayal laid bare under crystal lights. When the heavy doors closed behind me, the warm night air rushed in. And for the first time in years, I felt free enough to breathe. Got it. Here's the cinematic continuation of Section 1. This section peels back Bianca's calm surface to reveal her preparation and the stakes ahead. Behind me, I could almost hear Gregory's voice rising, frantic, confused. He had expected an explosion. A scene that would cast me as the bitter wife clinging to a dying marriage. Instead, he was the one unraveling. And that, of course, was the point. The envelope now sitting beside his untouched champagne glass wasn't just paper and ink. It was the weight of months, no years, of overlooked sacrifices and unnoticed patience. I hadn't stumbled into this moment unprepared. I had built it, brick by brick, while he was busy planning his escape. 3 months ago, it had begun with numbers. A transfer here, a debit there. Small enough to hide from most, but not from me. I'd managed our household finances for decades. I could read a spreadsheet like most people read a book. The patterns told me a story, and the story was ugly. At first, I thought it might be stress spending. Gregory had always soothed his insecurities with grand gestures, a new watch, a fancy dinner. A weekend trip to prove he was still the man he imagined himself to be. But the money trail didn't stop at indulgences. It twisted and split into hidden accounts, luxury gifts, deposits towards something more permanent. Then came the texts. Careless words glowing on a phone he left unlocked one night. Cassandra's name blinking back at me. Her promises, his declarations, their future plans. He thought I would never see it. He thought, even if I did, I'd swallow the pain and stay silent. That had been the rhythm of our marriage. Gregory dreamed, Gregory strayed, and I anchored the storm. But not this time. I remembered the prenup. 28 years ago. I had agreed to it because he insisted. His pride demanding protection for his family inheritance, his budding ventures. He never imagined it would one day be his noose. The infidelity clause was still binding. I knew it. And I made sure the attorneys I consulted confirmed it. Every receipt, every transfer, every late night dinner he thought he had hidden became evidence filed neatly in a growing case. And tonight, in that restaurant under those chandeliers, I delivered the first blow. I reached my car, exhaling into the quiet. For the first time in months, my hands didn't tremble when I touched the door handle. This wasn't the collapse of my life. It was the beginning of his. Perfect. Here comes section 3, the midpoint twist. This is where the story pivots, the calm facade collides with chaos, and Bianca faces her first big confrontation. The house was too quiet when I returned. The kind of silence that presses on your chest, daring you to mistake it for peace. Family photos still lined the hallway, Gregory smiling at Amelia's 6th birthday, his arms snug around my shoulders, our anniversary trip to Charleston, where we once swore nothing could shake us. Lies frozen in frames. I set my handbag down and let the silence breathe. For hours, I answered no calls except one, Amelia's. Her voice had cracked with worry. But I told her the same thing again and again, you did nothing wrong. Tonight is still yours. I wanted to shield her from the ugliness, if only for a little longer. But by dusk, Gregory's car roared into the driveway, breaking the fragile calm. A door slammed, heavy footsteps pounded, and then his voice, louder than I had ever heard it. Bianca, he shouted, charging into the living room. His face was flushed, his collar loose, and in his fist was the envelope I'd left behind. What the hell is this? I didn't flinch. My laptop rested on the coffee table, a folder of documents glowing faintly on the screen. I closed it with deliberate calm. You opened it. I assume, I said. You served me divorce papers at our daughter's graduation. His voice cracked on the word divorce, more rage than grief. Do you have any idea what you've done? I do, I replied. My voice was steady, though inside, my pulse hammered. I know exactly what I've done. I matched your timing with mine. Gregory blinked, thrown. He had expected tears, bargaining, a collapse he could control. Instead, he was standing in a battlefield where every weapon was aimed at him. His bravado flickered back. The prenup expired. Any lawyer will tell you that. You'll be lucky to leave this house with a dime. I let a small smile slip. Section 12. I said quietly. Fidelity clause. Still binding. You might want to check with a lawyer before you dismiss it. The color drained from his face. For the first time, the cracks showed. Bianca. His voice lowered, softer, almost pleading. 28 years together. You're really going to throw it all away like this? I stared at him. The man who once held me through miscarriages. Who once whispered promises under candlelight. A man I had loved so blindly that I never saw him sharpening the knife behind my back. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. You already did. A silence stretched between us. Thick as glass. Then his phone buzzed on the table. Cassandra's name lit the screen. I watched the panic flash in his eyes. And for the first time that night, I felt something unexpected, not anger, not triumph, pity. Because in that moment, Gregory realized he wasn't losing just me. He was losing everything. Here's the next act. Section 4 builds the pressure, weaving Bianca's inner turmoil with the external storm of family fallout. By morning, the whispers had already spread. Friends who had toasted Amelia the night before were now calling, their voices laced with false concern and hungry curiosity. I ignored most of them. For decades I'd been the woman who smiled politely, who played the part, who never let the cracks show. That woman was gone. But Amelia wasn't. She arrived at the house before noon, still in her graduation dress, her mascara smudged into dark shadows beneath her eyes. When she stepped inside, the first thing she saw was Gregory pacing the living room like a caged animal. Dad, she whispered, her voice small. He spun toward her, trying to gather himself, his features rearranging in the mask of a doting father. Pumpkin. Listen, no. She cut him off, her voice trembling with anger. Not today, not after what you did, Gregory faltered. Amelia rarely raised her voice. Her gentleness had always been his shield, proof, he claimed, that he was a good father. Now that shield was gone. I did this for us, he tried, spreading his hands. People grow apart. Your mother and I. You've humiliated her. Amelia snapped, the words sharp enough to slice. You humiliated me. On my day. The room thickened with silence. I wanted to step in, to soften her pain. But I knew this confrontation wasn't mine to control. Amelia needed to see him clearly. Without the illusions I had clung to for years. Gregory's phone buzzed again. Cassandra's name flashed across the screen, insistent. Amelia's gaze followed it, and something hardened in her eyes. You've been lying to us, she said quietly. Stealing money while I was working nights at the bookstore just to pay for textbooks. And you stood there yesterday smiling, as if any of this was normal. Gregory's jaw tightened. Don't talk to me like that. I'm still your father. You were my father. She whispered. Yesterday you made yourself a stranger. The words hit him harder than any legal document. For a moment, he looked as though the weight of it might crush him. Then, as always, he deflected. Your mother has poisoned you against me. She planned this. I rose from my chair, finally stepping in. Don't you dare. I said, my voice low. Steady. Don't you dare use me as your excuse. Amelia sees you for who you are, not because of me, but because of you. The front door swung open before he could respond. Diana, his sister, stepped in, her arms crossed, her eyes sharp. Behind her lingered Cassandra, hesitant, out of place in the daylight of our family home. The air snapped taut. This wasn't just a family argument anymore, it was the beginning of a reckoning. Here comes the climax. Section 5 is where all the tensions collide and something breaks open that cannot be undone. The four of us stood frozen in the living room, the air so tight it hummed. Diana's voice cut first. Reg, what are you doing here? She asked, each syllable heavy with disappointment. And dragging her into this house. Cassandra flinched, shifting her weight. For the first time she looked less like the poised other woman and more like someone realizing she'd been pulled into a war she never prepared for. Gregory ignored his sister. His focus was fixed on me. Unfreeze the accounts, Bianca. We can sort this out privately. No need to make this a circus. Amelia stepped forward, her eyes burning. The circus started when you stood in front of 50 people and told the world you were leaving Mom. Don't blame her now because you don't like how it feels to lose. Amelia. No. She snapped, her voice breaking. You don't get to call yourself my father today. Fathers protect their families. You tried to erase us. Gregory's mask cracked then. He ran a trembling hand over his face, but when it dropped, anger had returned to fill the cracks. You want the truth. Cassandra and I are building something new. Something honest. I deserve to be happy and so does she. But Cassandra didn't nod. Her gaze darted toward me, then Diana, then back to Gregory. And when she finally spoke, her voice was small. Reg, is that true? Did you move money into an account without telling me? The silence afterward was deafening. Gregory's throat worked but no words came. Cassandra's face drained of color. You said you were liquidating assets. That the beach house was nearly ours. Her voice rose, edged with panic. What else didn't you tell me? Gregory tried to steady her, reaching for her hand. She pulled back. And in that moment his empire collapsed. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating realization that he stood alone. I felt no triumph, only clarity. You wanted a new life, Gregory, I said softly, but you built it on lies. Lies to me, to our daughter, to Cassandra, even to yourself. That's not a life. That's a performance. And the curtain has finally dropped. His knees buckled, and for the first time, I saw him small. Not the towering husband who filled a room with charm, not the ambitious dreamer. Just a man crumpling under the weight of his own choices. Please, he whispered. It wasn't clear to whom. Amelia's tears fell silently, streaking the satin of her dress. Diana reached for her hand. Cassandra turned toward the door. Already halfway gone. And I stood perfectly still, the center of a storm I no longer feared. Because the moment Gregory's voice broke, I realized something profound. This wasn't the climax of my story. It was the climax of his. Mine was just beginning. Here's the final act. Section 6. It carries Bianca into closure, balancing justice with personal rebirth, and leaves the audience with a resonant final image. The rain fell on the courthouse steps like a quiet drumroll, steady and relentless. Inside, the proceedings had lasted less than an hour. Papers reviewed, clauses upheld, accounts divided. The judge's gavel struck once, and with it, nearly 3 decades of marriage were reduced to signatures and silence. Gregory sat across the aisle, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. Cassandra hadn't come. She had vanished weeks earlier, taking with her the illusions he had clung to. Now there was only the echo of his downfall debts, a dwindling business, an empty apartment he could barely afford. When the judge read her ruling aloud, the fidelity clause binding, the assets awarded, I felt no rush of victory. Just a deep bone-level exhale. Justice was not triumph. It was balance restored. Outside, Amelia waited beneath the courthouse arch, her umbrella tilted against the rain. She looked older somehow, wiser in a way that pained me. The night of her graduation had stolen innocence from both of us. Yet when she saw me step into the light drizzle, she smiled, tired, but proud. Is it over? She asked. It's finished. I corrected. Over is something else. That part takes time. We walked together in silence, our footsteps splashing in shallow puddles. Each drop against my skin felt like absolution, washing away pieces of a life that no longer belonged to me. Weeks later, I opened the door to a small office downtown. The paint still smelled fresh. The windows overlooked the city streets, and on the glass was a name I had chosen carefully: Caldwell Financial Transitions. It wasn't just a business. It was a reclamation. Women began to come, tentative, fragile, carrying their own envelopes of betrayal or loss. I guided them through numbers, through contracts, through futures they thought had been stolen. In their faces, I saw fragments of my own story, and in helping them, I stitched together the pieces of myself. Diana visited often, her laughter filling the rooms like sunlight. Amelia too, calling between projects at her new job in Charleston, telling me how she was learning to build a life on her own terms. Each call was proof the cycle had broken. One evening, as I locked the office, I paused before the sign again. The name gleamed against the glass, steady and sure. For so long, I had been defined by Gregory's choices, his ambitions, his betrayals. Now, at last, my name stood for something else. Freedom. I thought back to the envelope I had slid across the table that night. The weight of it. The silence that followed. It hadn't just been paper. It had been a key. And when Gregory opened it, he didn't just discover the end of his illusions. I discovered the beginning of myself. And that, I realized as the city lights flickered on around me, was the truest revenge of all.